The twin suns burned high over Marith 4, flattening the color from the sky until it looked bleached and lifeless. The grain fields stretched in perfect rows, precise lines that shimmered in the heat. From a distance, it might have seemed serene order imposed on wilderness. Up close, the air stank of hot oil and scorched chaff, and the soil cracked like broken glass beneath the pressure of endless harvest cycles. Syrian knelt between the rails, knees pressed into the dirt. Raw cord bit into her wrists behind her back, the fibers sawing deeper each time she shifted. Sweat slid down her violet skin, catching dust that clung like gritstone. Silver pulses flickered faintly beneath her collarbones, involuntary sparks of her kind's biology that betrayed what she wanted to hide fear. She tried to keep her chin lifted, to meet the sky as though dignity might be armor. But the strain made her neck tremble, and her white hair clung across her lips each time the dry wind stirred. She didn't look at the machine bearing down on her. She didn't need to. Its roar filled the world, steady and merciless, a sound as constant as the horizon. The HX-90 harvester was built to clear whatever lay in its path: grain, stone, animal, flesh. It didn't know how to stop. That was why they had left her here. A clean erasure, no blood for them to watch. When the machine reached her, there would be nothing left to carry home, nothing to mourn. Her vision tunneled, the edges closing down to a pinched circle of sun-bleached light. She forced her eyes wide, a futile defiance, as if seeing the end would make it less brutal. Her chest tightened. Breath tore shallow and fast, no rhythm, no control. She tried to brace herself, but her body had already locked muscles frozen. Waiting for impact, Nigel Doron drove the rover along the southern berm. Windows cracked to vent the heat, a crate of seed vials rattling against the dash. He had spent the day knee-deep in irrigation diagnostics, clogged valves, dying pumps, filters that needed replacing before the soil went brittle. Routine work. He liked it that way. Quiet, order. 8 years of solitude had taught him how to live inside monotony. His hands on the wheel were steady, his gaze drifting across the field by habit, scanning for patterns like he always did. Grain bent in the wake of the harvester, then rose again, predictable, perfect, then wrong. A shape broke the flow, small, still, pale against the glare. He frowned, reflex twitching through him before his mind caught up. His wristband flashed the harvester's readout, 32 kilometers an hour and climbing. Not debris, not a tool, a person. His chest tightened. He didn't think. He acted. The rover skidded as he slammed it into park, door flung wide before the tires stopped rolling. Heat hammered his back as he hit the ground running, boots striking hard, dust scraping his teeth. The harvester's blade screamed, climbing to full torque, the sound cutting straight through his ears. He sprinted along the berm, breath sharp, body falling into the economy of motion he thought he'd left behind with the Federation. Syrian's head jerked at the sound of his voice when he cut through the engine noise short, precise, a single command. Hold still. Her eyes locked on him, wide with disbelief. Then she froze again, too shocked to move. He vaulted onto the harvester's side ladder, ribs slamming metal, boots catching the rung. The sealed cab was empty. No pilot. He ripped open the service panel behind it, hand closing on the kill lever. It jammed halfway. He swore once, shoved his knife into the pivot, and slammed down with all his weight. Steel shrieked. The lever dropped. The engine coughed. The blades began to slow, but the machine's bulk carried it forward, momentum unstoppable. He dropped from the ladder, boots crunching dirt, and ran flat out for her. Syrian was locked rigid, body braced for the end. He hit her low, arm wrapping her waist, momentum rolling them sideways off the rail, just as the machine thundered past. The wind off the blades tore at his face, ripped a strip of her wrap loose, and slapped it across his cheek. The ground shook with the machine's weight. Chaff exploded into a shredded storm where her body had been. They landed hard on the dirt, dust choking his lungs. He rolled off her, gasping once before forcing his breath back under control. The harvester groaned to a halt 20 meters away, blades ticking as they spun down. His hands shook faintly from the adrenaline, but his knife was steady as he cut the cords binding her wrists. The fibers split cleanly. She jerked her arms forward, clutching them to her chest, shoulders hunched. The skin around her wrists was raw, marked deep. She didn't rub them. She just stared at him, panting, pupils blown wide, silver light flickering faint beneath her skin. He saw calculation in her eyes now, not just shock. "You're clear," he said, voice steady like it was a fact and not a mercy. Her chest rose in shallow bursts. She forced herself upright, legs trembling, but she stood, tall, rigid, not broken. He rose with her, dust clinging to his sweat-soaked shirt. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then the silence closed in, broken only by the ticking of cooling metal behind them. She had been meant to vanish beneath the blades. Instead, she stood, alive, staring at the human who had stepped out of nowhere and refused to let her die. The dome door sealed behind them with a hiss, shutting out the heat and the rasp of wind across the fields. Inside, the air was cooler, filtered, faintly metallic. Nigel dropped his gloves on the workbench and stripped the dust mask from his face. His chest still burned from the run, but his breathing was steady again. The place looked the way it always did, clean lines, sharp edges, every tool in its place. Order mattered here. It kept the systems alive. Dot's Ri own stood just inside the threshold, her back pressed against the wall as if testing how much space was hers. Her eyes moved quick and sharp, scanning every corner. The recessed bed along the far wall, the compact kitchen block, the shelves of labeled containers. She wasn't looking at comfort. She was measuring distance, escape routes. When the door's locks clicked, her shoulders tensed a fraction. Chin-lifting Nigel saw it. Deliberately, he stepped back and away from the panel, leaving the handle visible. "It opens from inside," he said, calm and factual. Her gaze snapped to him, then to the handle. She crossed the floor in 3 stiff steps, pressed it down. The latch clicked smooth beneath her palm. She opened the door an inch, saw the light and heat of the field waiting beyond, then shut it again. She didn't look relieved, but the air around her eased by a fraction. He busied himself at the sink, letting the sound of running water fill the silence. He washed grit from his hands, then laid a clean towel on the table, setting a cup of chilled Orvan water beside it. "Drink slow," he said. "You're dehydrated." She stared at the cup like it might be bait. Only when he stepped back did she move forward, lifting it carefully. She drank in measured sips, throat working, cords standing out against her skin. She set it down with precise control, aligning the rim to the table's edge, as if the act itself was ritual. Her wrists were red, ridged from the cords. Nigel noticed, then forced his eyes away. "There's a wash stall through there," he said, nodding to a narrow door beside the kitchen. "Water's hot." "It's clean." Her eyes narrowed, suspicion sharp as a blade. "I'll go alone." "Of course." He turned back to the workbench, picking up a damaged valve he hadn't touched in days. His hands moved with old habit, tools aligning by size, bolts laid in neat rows. The noise of the stall door opening and shutting came next, followed by the hiss of water. Steam drifted out across the dome, softening its edges. He focused on the valve, but his mind replayed the image of her kneeling on the tracks, rigid, waiting for the blades. She hadn't fought. She hadn't even flinched. It was the stillness of someone who had already decided she was finished. That image pressed on his chest harder than the weight of the harvester's wind. When the water stopped, silence stretched. He heard the shift of fabric, the soft tread of bare feet. When he turned, Syrian stood in the doorway, hair wet and combed back, the reclamation overall he had left on the chair tied loose at her waist. The zipper hung open to her sternum, the fabric gaping slightly with each breath. Her silver skin flecks had dimmed, pulsing low, steadier than before. She stayed close to the wall, posture tall but wary, eyes still scanning. Nigel kept his voice even. "Hungry?" She hesitated, then gave a single short nod. He cooked without speaking, Draxon mushrooms sizzling in a pan, Varin root broth thickening as he stirred. The sharp scent filled the dome, grounding him in the routine. He ladled it into a bowl, set it on the table, and stepped back. Syrian sat. Not relaxed, spine straight, shoulders square, but she sat. She ate with efficient precision, every movement controlled, eyes flicking to him between bites. When she was done, she laid the spoon across the bowl perfectly aligned. Another small ritual that spoke of discipline drilled deep. Nigel broke the silence. "They left you there," he said. Not a question. Her eyes flicked up, dark and sharp. Something moved beneath them, anger, shame. "They said I shamed them, that I had no place anymore." Her tone was even, but her hands curled against her thighs before she forced them still. "They thought the machine would do their work," he said. "No blood, no guilt. They wanted nothing. Like I was never made." Her voice was cold, but her fingers trembled once before she clenched them tight. "You're not nothing," Nigel said, quiet, factual. She searched his face, trying to see if he meant it or if it was something humans said out of habit. After a long moment, she looked away, back to the empty bowl. "You didn't have to stop," she said. "I know you could have driven past. I know that too." The words hung between them, heavy. She stood, spine rigid. "I will sleep here tonight. Tomorrow I leave." "All right," he said. He didn't argue. She moved toward the bedroom niche, paused at the threshold. "You won't stop me?" "No, even if you walk back into the field. But I'll ask you not to." Her eyes lingered on him, unreadable. Then she stepped inside, laying down with her back, turned to him. Nigel stood alone in the dome, hands braced on the counter, listening to the hum of the filters. He had saved her life, but he wasn't sure she believed it was worth saving. And for the first time in years, the silence inside the dome felt fragile, as if something alive had entered it, something that might not stay. Morning leaked pale across the horizon, washing the gold from the fields. The dome's vents shifted with a soft hiss as the air system adjusted for day cycle. Nigel was already awake, seated at the workbench with a half-disassembled valve laid out in precise arcs. He hadn't touched a thing for nearly an hour, just listening. Syrian's breathing in the niche had stayed slow and steady through the night. That meant something. Progress, maybe. When she finally stirred, he glanced over. She sat upright on the bed, hair tangled from sleep, the reclamation overall still hanging loose at her waist. Her eyes scanned the dome again, as though the room might have shifted in her absence. When her gaze met his, she straightened her shoulders, mask sliding back into place. "You didn't leave," he said quietly. "Not yet," she answered. Her voice was rasped, but steady. He poured 2 cups from the induction pot. The bitter smell of furlinseed coffee filled the dome. He placed one near her, careful not to crowd. She took it in both hands, feeling the heat more than drinking. "You live here alone," she said after a long silence. "For years." He leaned back against the counter. "After the collapse, most left. Someone had to keep the system running." She tilted her head, weighing his words. "You stay to feed people who will never see you. even if they've forgotten who grows their food. Something flickered across her expression, recognition, not sympathy. She sipped, lips tightening at the bitterness, before she set the cup down with deliberate precision. Then she stood. Where? Sector 9's valves, he said, slipping his tools into the rover's cradle. Filters need clearing. She followed him outside without another word. Heat slapped them both as the twin suns climbed higher, the smell of baked grain thick in the air. She stayed close, barefoot in the dust, her eyes always moving. Nigel recognized the stance, not fear, calculation. He'd carried it himself once, entering hostile ground at the trench. He knelt, unseating the rusted hatch with a grunt. The filter came out clogged with sand and brittle stalk fibers. He scraped it clean with steady hands, grit falling in dull clumps. Syrian crouched beside him, silent, eyes fixed on every motion. You know how these work? He asked. I know they keep the field alive. My family never showed me the rest. Families like yours usually don't. Her eyes snapped to him, sharp, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she reached out without being asked, holding the new filter steady while he bolted it back in. Her hands were sure, not trembling. The faint silver beneath her skin pulsed in rhythm with the sun. Why do they call you defiant? He asked. Her body went still. For a long moment, she didn't breathe. Then the words came slow, pushed through clenched teeth. I told them no. He glanced at her. No? They wanted me bonded. I refused. The grit in his hands stung, but he kept his voice even. That's not defiance. That's choice. They said it was betrayal, she whispered. Jaw tight enough that a muscle twitched in her cheek. He lowered the hatch gently, sealing it. Then they don't deserve your loyalty. The wind shifted, carrying her hair across her face. She didn't brush it back. Her eyes stayed on the dirt, but something in them had changed. Less armor, more raw edge. After a long silence, she stood, spine straightening, but her gaze lingered on him longer than it should have. They walked back to the rover without speaking. He noticed she didn't trail behind this time. She matched his stride, as though the field no longer belonged only to him. When the dome's cool air sealed around them again, she exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Nigel glanced at her once. The tremor he'd seen in her hands the night before was gone. She looked around the dome with sharper eyes now, not just testing it for exits, but as if weighing its shape against the idea of a place to remain. I will not stay, she said finally, voice firm. I didn't ask you to. Her gaze lingered on him. But you want me to? Yes, she didn't answer. She walked to the niche, slow but unhurried. At the threshold she paused, one hand on the frame, her back still to him. They called me defiant, she said softly, but they were afraid. Then she stepped inside, leaving him with the words hanging heavy in the air. Nigel stood at the workbench, staring at the neat rows of tools he'd set out. For the first time since he'd come to Mareth 4, order didn't feel like enough. Something had shifted. Evening pressed against the dome in a hush of orange light. The twin suns dipped, one after the other, leaving a thin burn on the horizon before the quick fall of shadow. The temperature dropped hard, as it always did, and Nigel lit the soft amber strips along the dome's walls. The air inside stayed steady 23 degrees, dry, balanced. He sat at the table with his wrist console, inputting field tallies. Numbers scrolled, orderly, controlled. Outside the glass wall, the harvester sat parked at its rail, bulk dark against the stubble fields. Syrian stood near the glass, arms crossed, her reflection layered ghost pale over the machine. She hadn't gone close to it since the rescue. Even now, her shoulders tightened, breaths shallow, as if the sight alone pressed weight into her chest. Nigel kept his eyes on the console, but his voice reached her. It won't move unless I tell it to. Her reply came flat. Precision doesn't make it merciful. That's the point. She turned then, studying him instead of the harvester. Why did you stop it? He set the console down, folding his hands loosely on the table. Because I could. That's not a reason. It's the only one that mattered in the moment. She moved closer, expression unreadable, eyes narrowing. You didn't know me. I didn't need to. For a second something cracked in her gazed out, maybe confusion. Then it shuddered again. She looked back at the glass, condensation beginning to blur her reflection. You risked your life for someone your world wouldn't even see. And they're blind. His voice was steady. Without heat, the words hung heavy between them. Weight settling into the dome's stillness. Syrian stayed very still, long enough that the hum of the air filters seemed loud. Then she turned, the rigid set of her shoulders less sharp than before. She walked toward the table and sat across from him. He rose and moved to the kitchen block, chopping red xyron tubers into neat squares. The pan hissed when the seed oil caught, releasing a sharp, earthy scent. He worked methodically, adding torn dried greens, grinding salt between his fingers. She watched him the entire time, silent, eyes tracking every motion like she was measuring him by his hands. When he placed the bowl before her, she hesitated only a breath before eating. Slow, controlled, not hurried, but when she finished, she set the spoon down with the same precise alignment she had used the night before. You've done this before, she said quietly. He met her eyes. Cook? Live beside someone broken. His jaw flexed once, but he didn't look away. I have. Most stay that way. And you think I won't? I think you might not want to. She froze, spoon resting on the bowl's rim, breath catching before she covered it with stillness. Her shoulders eased, just a fraction, not quite relaxed, but less rigid. She said nothing more. Nigel cleared the dishes and set them on the rack. When he turned back, she was still seated at the table, eyes distant, fingers resting lightly on the wood as if anchoring herself there. She looked at him again, studying him the way a soldier might watch a rival, waiting to see if he would shift or stay constant. He held her gaze without speaking. Finally, she stood, movements measured. She walked toward the bedroom niche, pausing only once, hand brushing the wall as though she needed to confirm its solidity. Her voice was softer when it came. I didn't freeze because I wanted to die. I froze because I thought maybe it wouldn't hurt. Nigel's reply was immediate, steady. I know. She lingered a beat, eyes searching his face like she wanted to be sure he meant it. Then she disappeared into the niche, leaving him in the dim light of the dome. He stood still, the silence no longer brittle, but waiting like something alive had entered the air and hadn't yet decided if it would stay. Dawn edged pale across the horizon, two thin white bars of light creeping over the fields. Inside the dome, the environmental system ticked softly as it shifted into day cycle, ventilation rising, thermal strips warming the floor. Nigel was already awake, boots laced, tools packed into the rover cradle. He moved with the same economy as always, but his eyes kept sliding toward the bedroom niche. Syrian emerged barefoot, rubbing her eyes with the heel of her hand. Her hair was loose from sleep, white strands tangled around her shoulders. The reclamation overall still hung at her waist, torso half-sipped, collarbones faintly glowing silver in the morning light. She blinked at the dome as though checking it hadn't rearranged itself overnight, then straightened when she saw him watching. You get up early, she said, voice low and rough. Work starts before the heat. Easier that way. Her eyes flicked to the rover door, already open, tools stacked inside. Where? Sector 11 filters need clearing. He clipped his console to his belt. Valves don't fix themselves. You do all of it alone? Yes, he shrugged. I'm still alive. So is the grain. She looked like she wanted to argue, lips parting, but she closed her mouth instead. She crossed to the table and sat, arms folded across the surface. Nigel set a bowl of warmed loranberry porridge and a cup of Orvan water in front of her. She glanced down at it, suspicious. "You made this," she said, double quotes, "yes." "Why?" "Because you'll need it if you come outside." Her gaze snapped up, sharp, testing. "You're asking me. I'm giving you the choice." A faint crease appeared between her brows, then smoothed again. She picked up the spoon and ate without comment, controlled, measured, but no longer guarded like the night before. He didn't press her with words. He let the silence sit, noticing that this time it didn't feel like something fragile that might break, but like space both of them were willing to share. When she finished, she pushed the bowl away, stood, and walked toward the rover. Her steps were quiet, but not tentative. "If I come, I don't carry tools," she said. "I watch." "Deal." The rover's engine growled low as it carried them across the berm road. Heat shimmered off the soil in rising waves, the stalks stiff and brittle in the early light. Syrian sat on the open step, hair whipping behind her, eyes fixed forward. She didn't glance at the harvester they passed, though Nigel saw the quick flicker of tension in her shoulders. By midday, they had cleared 3 clogged filters, flushing the lines clean. Syrian said little, but her movements told the story, crouching when he crouched, standing when he stood, handing him tools without being asked. She no longer moved like someone waiting to escape. She matched his pace unconsciously, as though the rhythm had become hers as well. When they returned to the dome, the cool air rushed around them, and she let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Nigel sealed the door and set down his tool bag. Syrian paused halfway across the room and turned to him, her expression unreadable, but her voice steady. "If I stay tonight, will you try to make me yours?" "No," he said immediately. Calm, even. "I'd see you as yours." Her lips parted slightly, caught off guard. The tension in her shoulders eased in a way he hadn't seen before. For the first time, her silence didn't feel like defense. It felt like possibility. Night laid its weight across the dome, the twin moons rising pale and cold over the darkened fields. The amber wall strips dimmed to a soft glow, painting the room in muted gold. Beyond the glass wall, the harvester's bulk loomed on its rails, silent now, only the faint tick of cooling metal drifting through the stillness. Nigel stood by the window, watching the ghostly shimmer of the stalks under moonlight. But his focus kept sliding back to the couch behind him. Syrian sat cross-legged on the cushions, hair damp from the wash, combed into a loose braid over one shoulder. She wore the black thermal shirt he'd left out for her, sleeves rolled halfway, collar gaping wide enough to show the faint pulse of silver beneath her collarbones. She dried the ends of her hair with the towel, movements slow, deliberate. When she caught him glancing, she didn't look away. "You always keep the lights low at night," she said, quietly. "Less glare on the glass," he answered, turning slightly. "And easier to sleep." Her eyes lingered on him, steady. "Do you sleep well?" "Usually. Unless something breaks." He gestured toward the workbench. "Something always could. That's not living," she said softly. "That's waiting for collapse." He let her words sit in the quiet, because they were true. He turned from the window and crossed the floor slowly, each step measured. She didn't move. He stopped near the couch, close but not touching. Her eyes tracked him, sharp but calm. "What about you?" he asked. "What does living mean to you now?" Her fingers stilled on the towel. For a moment, silence stretched. Then she set it aside. "Yesterday, I thought it meant dying clean. Today, it just means not being erased." "You're not erased," he said, crouching so his eyes met hers. "I was supposed to be." Her voice was steady. but something tight flickered behind her eyes. "You're here instead," he said. "That matters." She searched his face, as though testing if he believed it. He didn't look away. Slowly, she unfolded her legs, feet brushing the floor until her knees nearly touched his arm. She didn't pull back. "Nigel," she said quietly, "if I stay, would you see me as yours?" His reply came without pause. "No, I'd see you as yours." For the first time, her shoulders eased. She leaned forward, hair brushing his forearm, voice lower, almost unsteady. "I don't know how to belong to anything without disappearing inside it." "Then don't disappear," he said. "Just stay." Her breath trembled, then steadied. She nodded once, deliberate. Slowly, she lifted her hand and placed her palm against his chest. The warmth of her skin bled through the fabric, his heartbeat steady under her touch. He didn't move. He let her decide, her fingers pressed firmer, anchoring him. Then she rose, standing tall before him, the loose shirt slipping from one shoulder. Silver light pulsed faintly beneath her skin, glowing brighter with each breath. She hesitated one last moment, eyes searching his, then leaned down until her forehead rested against his. Both of them closed their eyes. The silence inside the dome shifted. It wasn't emptiness anymore. Nigel reached up, hand steady as it found her waist. She covered it with her own, firm and sure, holding it there. They didn't rush. They didn't speak. When at last they lay together on the couch, it wasn't desperate. It was careful, deliberate, chosen. The kind of act that belonged to people who had survived too much chaos to treat closeness lightly. Her skin was warm against his, silver glow rising and falling with her breath. His arms wrapped around her shoulders, anchoring her as she anchored him. Neither broke the silence. When it was done, they remained tangled beneath the blanket, her breathing slowing against his chest. His hand stayed firm on her back, steady, protective, unwilling to let her drift away. Outside, the fields lay silent under the twin moons. Inside, for the first time in years, the dome did not feel like a place for one man keeping machines alive. It felt like home. The first thin light of dawn crept across the dome's floor, pale bands sliding slowly over the cushions. The environmental system hummed as it shifted from night cycle to day, vents sighing, thermal strips warming. Nigel opened his eyes before the alarm triggered, instinct carrying him awake with the subtle change in air pressure. Syrian was still against him, head resting on his chest, one arm draped firmly across his waist. Not loose, not accidental. As if her body had decided in sleep what her words had not yet spoken. He lay still, not out of hesitation, but because he didn't want to move her. For the first time in years, his body wasn't braced for impact. The tension that had lived in his shoulders, in the lines of his jaw, had gone quiet. Her breathing stayed even. The faint silver glow beneath her skin brightened where the early light touched it. When she stirred, it was with a slow flex of her hand against his side. Her eyes opened halfway, clearer than they had been since the field. She blinked at the light, then tilted her face toward him. "You're awake early," she murmured. "I always am," he said softly. "Work starts soon." She studied him for a moment, as if measuring the truth of that answer against the steadiness in his eyes. Then she sat up, pulling the blanket with her. The black thermal shirt hung loose, slipping from one shoulder, and she didn't bother to fix it. Her gaze lingered on him longer than before. Her voice, when it came, was quiet, steady. "Do you still want me to stay?" "Yes," he said, no hesitation. Her mouth pressed into a thin line, not distrust, but something closer to disbelief. "Even if I can't be what I was supposed to be?" "I don't need who we're supposed to be," he said. "Just who you are." She looked at him then with the same piercing focus she had used to map the dome's exits, but softer now, the edge dulled. After a long moment, She nodded once, deliberate. Then I'll stay. The words landed in him like a weight shifted off his chest. He rose, pulling on his shirt, moving into the familiar morning routine: coffee grinding, porridge warming. Steam filled the air with bitter earth and faint sweetness. Syrian joined him at the table, barefoot, blankets still draped around her shoulders. She sat close enough that their knees brushed beneath the surface. This time she didn't shift away. They ate in silence, not the brittle silence of suspicion, but the quiet of space shared without demand. When they finished, she rose and walked to the glass wall. The fields outside glowed faint gold under the twin suns. The harvester sat dark on its track, idle, status lights dead. She placed her palm against the glass. For the first time, she didn't flinch at the sight. She let her hand fall and turned back to him. "This place could be something," she said. "If you weren't alone in it." "I'm not," he answered. The words were simple, factual. She seemed to realize it. Her mouth softened, almost a smile, as if the memory of one was returning. She crossed back to the table, standing over him. Her silver flecks shimmered, brighter than he had seen it, as though her body itself declared what her voice had only begun to. "Except, this is ours now," she said. He didn't correct her. That evening, when the suns fell and the dome dimmed to amber, they stood side by side at the glass wall, watching the wind ripple through the grain. Her hand brushed his, light at first, then firmer when he caught it. She didn't pull away. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. Syrian had been meant to vanish, erased by the machine. Instead, she stayed. And for the first time in 4 long years, the dome wasn't just a place to keep the fields alive. It was a place to live. It was home.